Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're diving into a scientific paper that's trying to get to the bottom of a huge question. What is going on with all these symptoms that just stick around, long after COVID-19?
You've probably heard about this, or maybe you even know someone who's going through it. We're talking about millions of people who have symptoms that just won't quit, for months, sometimes even years after they got sick or got a vaccine. It affects their whole body. So the big question is, what's really causing all this?
Right, this whole thing is often called long COVID, or sometimes post-vaccine syndrome, and it's everywhere. The paper we're looking at today digs into a possible biological reason for what's happening.
Okay, to really get a sense of how big this is, check this out. The paper mentions one estimate that says up to half, 50%, of people who get infected with SARS-CoV-2 might end up with some form of long COVID. That is just a staggering number of people we're talking about.
And get this, it's not just about getting sick from the virus. The authors also dug into studies on post-vaccination syndrome. One study they looked at found that over half the people reported symptoms after their first shots, but that number leaped to almost 84% after a booster. Wow. I mean, those are some really eye-opening figures that show we need to figure this out.
So what could possibly be the common link here between the infection and the vaccine? Well, this paper points the finger at one main suspect, the spike protein.
So, the spike protein, right? It's the part of the virus that lets it into our cells. It's also the very thing that vaccines use to teach our immune system what to fight. It's supposed to interact with our bodies. But the big question the paper asks is, what if that interaction has some side effects, some long-term consequences we didn't expect?
Okay, now this is where things get super interesting. You might think a spike protein is a spike protein, but not exactly. The paper points out a really key difference. The one our bodies make from the vaccine is tweaked. It's been engineered to be more stable so it can train our immune system better. Think of it like a practice dummy that's built to be extra tough. But because it's different, it might not get taken apart and cleaned up by our body in the same way the natural virus's protein does.
All right, so we've got our suspect. Now let's look at the case against it. The researchers went through a ton of existing science, and here's what they found broken down by body system.
They're basically showing that the spike protein could be causing trouble all over the place. We're talking cardiovascular, hematological, neurological, you name it.
First up, the heart. The paper pulls together research suggesting the spike protein might be a bit of a bully to our cardiovascular system. We're talking about disrupting the very cells that control our blood flow and messing with the tiny power plants, the mitochondria, in our heart cells. And get this, they've even found it right there in the heart tissue of patients with vaccine-induced myocarditis.
And then there's our blood. This quote really jumps out. It points to this incredible finding where scientists looked inside blood clots taken from stroke patients, and guess what they found? The spike protein. Just the spike protein, no other bits of the virus. It was there, all by itself, in the clot. That's a pretty big clue.
The brain isn't safe either, it seems. The paper goes into how the spike protein might be able to weaken the blood-brain barrier. That's like the brain's personal bodyguard. It could also stir up certain cells that then cause nerve damage. And in animal studies, it's been linked to symptoms that sound a heck of a lot like the brain fog so many people talk about.
Okay, so we've got a suspect that can cause damage. But here's the other part of the puzzle. How long does this intruder hang around?
And this is really a crucial piece of the evidence. The paper highlights studies that have found the spike protein hanging out in the body for months, up to 6 months after vaccination in one case, and up to 15 months after infection in another. And they're finding it in people who have those long-term symptoms. It really suggests that for some reason, our bodies are having a hard time getting rid of it.
So given all this, that the spike protein might be harmful, and that it seems to stick around, the authors then do something pretty interesting. They propose a logical next step. What if we could help the body get rid of it? And they lay out a basic detox idea. It involves 3 things you can actually get as over-the-counter supplements. So let's see what they are and what they're supposed to do, at least in theory.
Okay, so first up is something called Nattokinase. It's an enzyme from fermented soybeans. Yep, like in the Japanese dish natto. And some lab studies suggest it can actually chop up the spike protein. Then there's Bromelain, which comes from pineapple stems. It's also thought to break down the spike protein and, as a bonus, might help with inflammation. And finally, Curcumin, the active stuff in turmeric. The idea here is that it could help block the spike protein from latching onto our cells in the first place, and it's also a well-known anti-inflammatory.
So the thinking behind using this trio is that you're attacking the problem from a few different directions, right? You're trying to degrade the spike protein itself, you're trying to calm down the inflammation, and you're also trying to deal with those tiny blood clots that have been a concern.
Now, I know what you're thinking. This sounds pretty promising. But, and this is a huge but, the authors end with a very, very important point.
And honestly, this might be the most important thing to take away from this whole paper. What they've laid out is not medical advice. It's a hypothesis. A really interesting, well-thought-out idea that makes sense on paper. But it absolutely has to be tested in large-scale, proper, randomized clinical trials before anyone can say it works or that it's safe.
In fact, these specifically warn against just going out and trying this on your own. Why? Because these supplements can affect things like blood clotting. So they're very clear. This is something that would need a doctor's supervision. Period. Self-experimenting is not the way to go.
So what this paper really does is kick the door open to a super fascinating and maybe even a crucial new direction for research. It lays out a roadmap for scientists to follow. But the final chapter on this story, it's not written yet. It leaves us all waiting for the scientific community to answer that big, lingering question. Could this really be a key to solving the mystery of long COVID?